The quantum lift doors hissed open and Recruit Thorne stepped into what felt like the setup for a terrible joke. A human walks into an alien space academy. Except this wasn't a joke, this was his first day at the Galactic Defense Force Academy, and judging by the looks he was getting, he was about to become one. "Oh, look what the gravitational pull dragged in," a voice chirped from somewhere above. Thorne looked up to see a Nexilian perched on a support beam, their iridescent wings folded neatly against their back. "They're letting primates enroll now?" Scattered laughter echoed through the massive orientation hall. Thorne squared his shoulders and kept walking, pretending not to notice how the other recruits parted before him, like he was carrying some contagious disease. He'd expected this reaction. Humans were the newest species to join the Galactic Defense Force, and their reputation preceded them. "Careful, Zix 427, another voice rumbled, this one belonging to a towering Cranaxian whose crystalline skin refracted light in dazzling patterns. "I heard these humans break easily. Wouldn't want to damage the Academy's new pet project." More laughter. Thorne tightened his grip on his regulation duffel bag, knuckles whitening. The Academy's acceptance rate was 0.01% across all species. He'd earned his place here, same as them. "Actually," Thorne spoke up, forcing a casual tone, "humans are quite resilient. We just prefer not to show off about it." The Cranaxian, whose name tag read Vrax, turned their crystalline head toward him. "Resilient? That's rich coming from a species that can't even regrow limbs. My third cycle offspring has better regenerative capabilities than your entire species." A Mectarian cadet nearby whirred in agreement, their cybernetic enhancements gleaming. "Their neural processing speed is laughable. No quantum computing capabilities whatsoever. They still use biological synapses, can you believe it?" Thorne watched as a group of Etherians floated by, their translucent bodies pulsing with bioluminescence. They didn't even try to hide their disdain, passing straight through other cadets but deliberately moving around him as if he were toxic waste. "Welcome, recruits," a booming voice cut through the chatter. An enormous hologram materialized in the center of the hall, depicting Commandant Axior, a legendary Celestian whose nebulous form stretched nearly to the ceiling. "You represent the finest your species have to offer. Together, you will train to become the next generation of the Galactic Defense Force." The Commandant's cosmic eyes swept across the gathering. "Some of you come from warrior races," appreciative murmurs from the Cranaxians, "others from species of unparalleled intellectual achievement." The Mectarians straightened their metallic spines. "And some," their gaze lingered on Thorne, "from civilizations we are still getting to know." "Great," Thorne muttered under his breath. "No pressure." A Cillian recruit next to him twitched their antennae. "I heard humans can't even perform basic telepathic communication," they broadcasted loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "They have to rely on crude vocal vibrations. How primitive." "At least they're entertaining," Zix 427 called down from their perch. "Watch this. Hey human, catch." The Nexilians spat a glob of adhesive biotoxin toward Thorne. With reflexes honed by years of zero-G training, Thorne sidestepped the projectile, letting it splat harmlessly against the floor. "Sorry to disappoint," he said, flashing a grin that was all teeth. "But humans are also pretty good at dodging." The Nexilians' wings buzzed in annoyance, but before they could respond, the orientation hall's lighting shifted to training configuration. "Report to your assigned quarters," the Commandant's hologram instructed. "Tomorrow, we begin." As Thorne made his way to the residential wing, he caught snippets of conversations in various languages, most of them questioning how a mere human had been admitted to the academy. Let them talk, he thought. They'd learn soon enough that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in regeneration, telepathy, or biological weapons. It was in being underestimated. Entering his assigned pod, Thorne tossed his duffel onto the adaptive morphic bed, which struggled briefly to accommodate human physiology, before settling into an approximation of a mattress. Through the quantum glass window, he could see the 3 moons of Centaurus Prime rising over the horizon, casting multiple shadows across the Academy's gleaming spires. "Begin cadet profile scan," he commanded the room's AI. "Processing," the AI responded. "Species human, enhanced capabilities, none detected. Biological limitations, multiple. Threat assessment, minimal." Thorne laughed. "We'll see about that." The first week of training felt like being thrown into a quantum reactor, intense, disorientating, and potentially lethal. The Academy's combat simulation chamber was a massive geodesic dome where gravity, atmosphere, and reality itself could be manipulated at the instructor's whims. Today's exercise, Survival in Extreme Environments, announced Lieutenant Crix, a Volturian, whose plasma-based form rippled with barely contained energy. Your suits will protect you from immediate death. Everything else is up to you. Thorne checked his environment suit seals for the third time. Unlike his classmates, he couldn't survive vacuum exposure, acid atmospheres, or radiation storms without protection. One suit failure, and he'd be either very dead or very embarrassed, assuming there was enough left of him to feel embarrassment. Beginning simulation in 3, 2, 1. The chamber transformed into a churning hellscape of sulfuric acid rain and electrical storms. Through the caustic downpour, Thorne could see his fellow cadets adapting with ease. The Cranaxians' crystalline bodies simply deflected the acid, while the Etherians turned gaseous to ride the storm currents. Zix 427 secreted a protective coating and rolled their eyes at Thorne's reliance on primitive technology. Struggling already, human? Vrax called out as a lightning bolt struck their crystalline form and dispersed harmlessly. Maybe you should have joined the maintenance crew instead. Thorne ignored them, focusing on reading the atmospheric patterns. Humans might not have natural defenses, but they had millions of years of experience reading weather. There was a pattern to the lightning strikes, a rhythm to the acid rain. While his classmates relied on their biological advantages, Thorne calculated, timed, and moved with precision through the chaos. He was the only one who completed the course without being hit once. Acceptable performance, Lieutenant Crix noted, their plasma form flickering with what might have been approval. Though relying on artificial protection is a significant weakness. The technology training sessions weren't any better. The Academy's computer systems were designed for direct neural interface, something human brains weren't equipped to handle. While other cadets merged their consciousness with the quantum mainframe, Thorne had to use a clunky manual interface that made him feel like he was trying to perform surgery wearing oven mitts. By the time you input the command, the battle will be over, a Mectarian instructor observed as Thorne's fingers flew across the holographic controls. Perhaps we should requisition some stone tablets for you. But what the aliens saw as primitive linear thinking turned out to be an unexpected advantage. During a cybersecurity exercise, while his classmates were trapped in a quantum encryption maze, Thorne's limited human perspective spotted a pattern that their more advanced minds had overcomplicated. He broke through the firewall first, though the achievement was dismissed as beginner's luck by both instructors and fellow cadets. Physical training brought its own unique challenges. The Academy's obstacle course changed its configuration randomly, requiring cadets to adapt instantly to new challenges. Thorne watched as his classmates used their natural abilities to breeze through, Nexilians flying, Etherians phasing through solid matter, Cranaxians simply smashing through barriers. "Come on, human," Zix 427 taunted, hovering overhead. "Show us some of that famous human resilience." Thorne was drenched in sweat, his muscles screaming from exertion. He couldn't fly, couldn't phase, couldn't smash. But humans had something else: stubborn, relentless determination. Where others saw obstacles, he saw puzzles to be solved. When direct paths were blocked, he found creative alternatives. He finished the course dead last, but he finished something the instructors had clearly not expected. "Your species' physical limitations are concerning," the combat instructor, a four-armed Nexovian, stated during evaluations. "However, your problem-solving approach is unusual." Unusual. That seemed to be the consensus about human methodology. During team exercises, Thorne's suggestions were routinely ignored in favor of more advanced solutions. The fact that his strategies often proved effective was attributed to coincidence or primitive luck. The breaking point came during deep space survival training. Their pod systems were deliberately sabotaged, leaving them stranded in a debris field with rapidly depleting resources. While his teammates argued about the optimal quantum solutions, Thorne noticed something they'd overlooked: a pattern in the debris movement that suggested a nearby gravity well. "We could use the debris field itself for propulsion," he suggested, "like sailing ships used wind currents on Earth." "Please," Vrax scoffed, "spare us your prehistoric analogies. This requires advanced gravitational calculations, not whatever passed for physics on your underdeveloped world. They spent 2 hours attempting increasingly complex solutions while their air supply dwindled. Finally, with alarms blaring, they reluctantly tried Thorne's approach. It worked perfectly, though no one acknowledged whose idea it had been. That evening, reviewing the day's failures and small, ignored victories, Thorne received a message from the Academy's AI. Cadet Performance Review Update, Species Human, Enhanced Capabilities, None Detected. Biological Limitations, Multiple. Threat Assessment, Recalculating. The Academy's annual Combat Proficiency Exhibition was a spectacle that drew observers from across the galaxy. Each cadet would demonstrate their species' unique combat capabilities in front of the assembled Galactic Defense Force brass, potential employers, and their peers. For most species, it was a chance to shine. For Thorne, it was about to become a nightmare. Next demonstration, Cadet Thorne, Human Division, announced the combat instructor. The massive arena fell silent, then erupted in poorly concealed snickers. Vrax leaned over to Zix 427. This should be entertaining. What's he going to show us? How to breathe oxygen? Thorne stepped into the arena, his environment suit gleaming under the harsh lights. He'd spent weeks preparing for this moment, determined to prove that humans deserved their place in the Academy. Begin combat simulation, the instructor commanded. The holographic enemies materialized, a standard set of combat drones programmed to test reflexes and tactical thinking. Thorne moved with practiced precision, each step calculated, each strike measured. Then everything went wrong. His environment suit systems flickered and died. Warning lights flashed across his helmet display before going dark. Through his rapidly fogging visor, Thorne caught glimpses of Zix 427 and several others trying to suppress their laughter. This was no malfunction. They'd sabotaged his suit. Having technical difficulties, human? Vrax called out, their crystalline form glittering with amusement. Perhaps you should have brought some backup stone tools. The combat drones, unaware of his predicament, continued their attack pattern. Without his suit's enhanced capabilities, Thorne was effectively blind and defenseless in front of the entire Academy. Something snapped inside him. Months of mockery, dismissal, and barely concealed contempt crystallized into a single, clarifying moment of rage. With shaking hands, Thorne reached up and unsealed his helmet. "Cadet, that is not advisable," the instructor began. Thorne threw the helmet aside. Then, piece by piece, he stripped off the sabotaged environment suit until he stood in his basic Academy uniform. The arena had gone completely silent. "You want to see what humans can do," he announced, his voice carrying across the stunned audience. "Let me show you." Without the suit's interface, he couldn't see the drone's tactical displays or prediction patterns. But humans had spent millennia fighting without augmented reality or neural interfaces. They'd survived and thrived using something far more primitive and far more powerful instinct. Thorne moved like his ancestors had moved when hunting on the savannas of Earth, reading subtle shifts in air currents, anticipating movement patterns, striking with precision born from desperation. Each drone that fell was a statement. Each perfectly timed dodge was a rebuttal to every sneer and dismissal he'd endured. When the last drone crashed to the arena floor, Thorne stood unscathed, breathing heavily, fists clenched. He turned to face his classmates, locking eyes with Vrax and Zix 427. "Next time you want to test human capabilities," he said, his voice carrying in the dead silence, "just ask. We're pretty good at demonstrations." He walked out of the arena, leaving behind his damaged suit and, he hoped, any doubt about humanity's place in the Academy. Back in his quarters, he received another AI update. Cadet Performance Review Amendment, Species Human, Enhanced Capabilities, Recategorizing, Biological Limitations, Assessment Ongoing, Threat Assessment Significant. Thorne allowed himself a grim smile. They'd wanted to break him. Instead, they'd freed him from trying to fight like them. It was time to show the galaxy what humans could really do. And as if on cue, the Academy's emergency alarms began to wail. The quantum glass windows darkened as emergency force fields activated. Red warning lights pulsed through the corridors as Thorne sprinted toward the command center. The Academy's AI voice, usually smooth and controlled, now crackled with interference. "Warning! Catastrophic quantum core destabilization detected. Containment systems failing. All cadets proceed to emergency evacuation points. This is not a drill. Thorne rounded a corner and nearly collided with a group of panic-stricken first years. The Academy's quantum core powered everything from life support to artificial gravity, if it went critical. The safety protocols should have prevented this, a Mectarian cadet was saying, their cybernetic components flickering with anxiety. The quantum matrices are triple redundant. Move to evacuation points. Lieutenant Crix's plasma form streaked past them. The containment field is failing. We have less than 30 minutes before... A violent tremor shook the station. The lights flickered, and for a moment, artificial gravity wavered. Thorne's stomach lurched as he briefly floated before being slammed back to the floor. "Lieutenant," he called out, "what about the cadets in the lower levels?" The Volturian's plasma form pulsed with concern. "The turbolifts are offline. Level 3 and below are sealed by emergency bulkheads. We've lost contact with anyone down there." Another tremor, stronger this time. Through the quantum glass, Thorne could see escape pods launching from the upper levels, streaking away from the Academy like scattered seeds. "How many?" he demanded. "At least 30 cadets trapped below, mostly first years in the simulation chambers." The lieutenant's form flickered. "The radiation levels are already too high for rescue teams. We have to evacuate now." Thorne's mind raced. 30 cadets. He recognized the fear in Lieutenant Crix's voice, the same fear he'd heard in recordings of old Earth space disasters. The kind of fear that preceded phrases like, acceptable losses. "There has to be a way down there," he insisted. "The maintenance shafts," Vrax spoke up unexpectedly. The Chronaxian's crystalline form had appeared beside them, but the radiation would kill any organic being before they reached level 3. Even my crystalline structure couldn't withstand those levels for long. "What about the environmental suits?" Zix 427 suggested, their wings buzzing with agitation. "The quantum interference would fry their systems in seconds," the Mectarian cadet replied. "We already lost contact with 3 rescue drones." Thorne thought about the 30 cadets below. First years who'd probably never experienced a real crisis, trapped in failing simulation chambers. He thought about his own suit, now lying in pieces on the arena floor. And then he thought about something else, something from humanity's history of disasters, triumphs, and desperate gambles. "The old maintenance tunnels," he said suddenly. "The ones they used during construction before the quantum systems were installed." "Those haven't been used in decades," Lieutenant Crix objected. "They're not even on current station schematics." "But they're analog, mechanical, no quantum systems to fail." Thorne was already moving. "And they were designed for maintenance robots. Basic machines, like humans." Another violent shake rocked the station. Warning indicators flashed across the quantum glass. 15 minutes to core breach. "You'll never make it in time," Vrax said, but their tone had changed. There was something like respect creeping into their crystalline voice. "And even if you do..." "I just demonstrated how much humans can do without fancy technology," Thorne replied, stripping off his uniform jacket. "Time to prove it wasn't a fluke." He found the maintenance access panel behind an ornamental wall section. The manual release lever was stiff with decades of disuse, but human muscles, evolved to throw spears and climb trees, were more than equal to the task. "I'm coming with you," Vrax announced suddenly. "My crystalline structure can help shield you from some of the radiation. Not much, but..." "Me too," Zix 427 added. "My biotoxin coating might help protect against some of the effects, and I can fly ahead to scout." The Mectarian cadet stepped forward. "My systems are hardened against quantum interference. I can interface with any old tech we find." Lieutenant Crix's plasma form pulsed with what might have been pride. "Go. I'll coordinate evacuation from here. You have 14 minutes before the core goes critical. Whatever you're going to do." "Sometimes the most primitive solution is the right one," Thorne said, thinking of all the times human ingenuity had overcome seemingly impossible odds. "Let's go save our classmates." The maintenance tunnel was narrow, dark, and filled with decades of dust. As they descended, Thorne could feel the temperature rising, feel the radiation beginning to prickle at his skin. But humans had evolved to persist, to endure, to push through pain and fear and darkness. Behind them, the Academy's AI made one final announcement before falling silent. "Warning, quantum core critical. Evacuation protocols failed. Containment breach imminent. Emergency systems offline. Automated systems offline. Switching to baseline protocols." In the darkness of the maintenance shaft, guided only by Vrax's crystalline glow and the pulse of emergency lights, Thorne smiled grimly. Baseline protocols, no quantum enhancement, no neural interfaces, no advanced alien technology. Just what humanity did best, surviving against the odds. The maintenance shaft plunged 3 levels down through the heart of the academy. Thorne led the way, with Vrax's crystalline glow providing just enough light to navigate. Every few meters, emergency lights pulsed red through rusted grates, marking their descent into the dying station. "Radiation levels are becoming dangerous," the Mectarian reported, their cybernetic sensors whirring. 10 minutes until core breach." Sweat poured down Thorne's face, his muscles burning from climbing down the ancient maintenance ladders. Each rung had to be tested. Decades of disuse had left some corroded and weak. His primitive nervous system screamed warnings about the growing radiation, but he pushed through. Humans had been pushing through their bodies' warnings since they first discovered fire. "There," Zix 427 called from ahead, their wings humming in the confined space. "I can see the level 3 access point, but the door, it's completely sealed. The manual override looks fused." Thorne reached the landing, examining the heavy metal door. His alien companions watched as he ran his hands over the surface, feeling for weaknesses the way his ancestors had once read terrain for signs of prey. "The hinges," he muttered. "Look at the stress patterns in the metal. The quantum containment field is warping the frame." "Even if you're right," Vrax said, "we can't break through that. Even my crystalline form couldn't." "We don't need to break it," Thorne interrupted. "We need to use the station's own pressure against it. Basic physics. No quantum mechanics required." He turned to the Mectarian. "Those drones we fought in the arena, they had pneumatic striking systems, right?" The Mectarian's cybernetic eyes whirred as they processed the idea. "Yes, but... the maintenance shaft's atmospheric pressure, if we can create a focused pressure differential." "Zix 427, Thorne called up to the hovering Nexilian. "Your biotoxin, can you make it more viscous? Something that could seal gaps?" "Of course, but," understanding dawned in their compound eyes, "you want to create an airtight seal around the doorframe." "Vrax, your crystalline structure can channel and focus force, right? Like a lens focuses light." The Cranaxian's form shimmered. "Theoretically, my people used similar principles in early mining operations before we developed quantum extraction methods. Working together, they sealed the edges of the doorframe with Zix 427's modified biotoxin. Vrax positioned themselves to focus the building pressure, while the Mectarian used their hardened systems to interface with the ancient emergency release valves. 7 minutes to core breach," the Mectarian warned. "Now," Thorne commanded. The Mectarian triggered the valves. Pressurized air slammed against the sealed door, channeled and focused by Vrax's crystalline form. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a shriek of protesting metal, the door burst inward. They rushed through into chaos. The simulation chambers had become death traps, their quantum fields fluctuating wildly. Through the observation windows, Thorne could see first-year cadets trapped in failing simulations, their environment suits barely protecting them from the growing radiation. "The chamber controls are quantum locked," the Mectarian reported. "Without the main systems." "Look for mechanical backups," Thorne ordered, already moving. "Every system this old has them. Humans learned that lesson centuries ago. Never build something that can't be fixed with a wrench." They split up, searching the facility. Thorne's primitive eyes evolved to spot subtle patterns, notice something. Wear marks on the floor leading to a maintenance panel. Inside, beneath layers of dust, he found what he was looking for, manual override controls. "Here!" he shouted, "but they're seized up, decades of disuse." Vrax moved to help, but Thorne waved them back. "No, the radiation's affecting your crystal matrix. I can see the distortion. You'll never have enough strength to..." Thorne gripped the manual wheel and pulled. Muscles screamed, tendons threatened to snap, but this was what humans were built for. Not quick bursts of super strength, but sustained, grinding effort. The ability to push through pain, to ignore the body's demands to stop. The wheel turned a fraction, then another. Centuries of human evolution, of persistence hunting, of building pyramids, of surviving ice ages, focused down to this one moment of pure, stubborn determination. With a grinding shriek, the wheel spun free. Emergency systems engaged with a hiss of hydraulics. One by one, the simulation chambers powered down to basic life support. 4 minutes, the Mectarian called out. We'll never get them all to the surface in time. Thorne was already moving to the next challenge. We're not going up. Look at the old system maps. These maintenance tunnels connect to the station's original emergency bunker, the one they used during construction before the quantum shelters were installed. That bunker won't withstand a core breach, Zix 427 objected. It doesn't need to. It just needs to shield us long enough for rescue ships to lock onto our position. Basic radiation shielding and life support. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one, Vrax finished, their crystalline form gleaming with new respect. They worked together to evacuate the simulation chambers. The Mectarian interfaced with old systems. Zix 427 flew ahead to scout the tunnel path, and Vrax used their crystalline form to help shield the weakest from radiation. And Thorne did what humans had always done. He encouraged, organized, and when necessary, carried those who couldn't walk. The last group reached the bunker with less than a minute to spare. As the heavy blast doors sealed behind them, Thorne could feel the station beginning to tear itself apart. Power systems operational, the Mectarian reported, interfacing with the bunker's ancient controls. Basic life support online, radiation shielding at maximum. It's not much, but it's enough, Thorne said, helping a young Etherian cadet settle onto one of the emergency benches. Humans have survived worse with less. The station shuddered. Through the bunker's tiny viewpoint, they could see the quantum core beginning to breach, reality itself warping around the containment failure. But in here, surrounded by simple steel and basic engineering, 34 cadets, human and alien alike, waited out the storm. The Academy's AI made one final update before the quantum systems failed completely. Emergency notification, species, human, enhanced capabilities, reclassified, biological limitations, insufficient data, threat assessment, do not underestimate. 3 days later, Thorne stood before the Galactic Defense Force Command Board as they reviewed the Academy disaster. The quantum core breach had destroyed most of the station's advanced systems, but thanks to basic engineering and human ingenuity, there had been 0 casualties. The rescue crews found you all in a construction bunker that wasn't even in our current schematics, Admiral Nexus stated, their energy form rippling with barely contained amazement, using outdated technology that somehow survived a quantum catastrophe. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways, sir, Thorne replied. Humans learned that lesson through centuries of our own disasters. Indeed, the Admiral's form shifted thoughtfully. Your classmates have been quite vocal about your actions, particularly interesting given their previous assessments of human capabilities. Vrax stepped forward, their crystalline form still showing slight radiation damage. We were wrong, Admiral. We assumed advance meant better. But Cadet Thorne showed us that true advancement isn't about replacing the old with the new, it's about knowing when to use each. The Academy will be rebuilt, announced Commandant Axior's hologram, with some modifications to our approach. Perhaps an over-reliance on quantum systems has made us vulnerable in ways we didn't expect. Quantum physics is amazing, Thorne agreed, but sometimes you just need a wrench and the stubbornness to use it. Scattered laughter rippled through the chamber, not mockery this time, but genuine appreciation. Thorne spotted Zix 427 in the crowd, their wings glinting as they gave him a respectful nod. The Mectarian cadets stood nearby, their cybernetic systems now supplemented with manual backups. There's been a request, Admiral Nexus continued, from your fellow cadets. They want to incorporate primitive survival techniques into the standard curriculum. Apparently, there's a growing interest in learning how to function without quantum assistance. They've specifically requested you as an instructor. Thorne blinked in surprise. Me, sir? You've proven that humanity has something unique to offer the Galactic Defense Force. Not despite your limitations, but because of them. Your species' ability to adapt, to find simple solutions to complex problems, to endure, these are not weaknesses, they are capabilities we never knew we needed. The Admiral's energy form expanded, addressing the entire assembly. The Academy will be rebuilt with a new philosophy. Advanced technology will be complemented by basic engineering. Quantum systems will have mechanical backups, and most importantly, no species approach will be dismissed as primitive or outdated. Though perhaps, Commandant Axior added with what might have been a smile in their nebulous form, we should refrain from calling human methods primitive altogether. After the ceremony, Thorne found himself surrounded by his former tormentors turned allies. Vrax approached first, their crystalline form catching the light. "So, instructor," they said, "when do we start learning these simple solutions of yours?" "First lesson's free," Thorne replied with a grin. "Sometimes the best technology is no technology at all." "And the second lesson?" Zix 427 asked, hovering nearby. "Never underestimate a species that survived its own evolution through sheer stubbornness." The Academy's new AI system chose that moment to make its first official announcement. Notice to all cadets, basic engineering and survival skills course now mandatory for all species. Course instructor, Cadet Thorne. Warning, course may involve excessive use of primitive tools, creative problem solving, and learning to appreciate the elegant simplicity of a well-placed wrench. As laughter filled the chamber, Thorne smiled. Humans had finally found their place in the galaxy, not by trying to match advanced alien capabilities, but by embracing their own unique approach to survival. Sometimes being underestimated was the greatest advantage of all.